I stayed at a lovely Airbnb in Iowa for my little brother's graduation. He didn't know I was going to make it, so we threw a surprise party at the Airbnb. While we were setting up, my other brother and I went down to the basement to get an extra table. The second we got down there, we looked at each other and said, "Yup, it's scary here." We searched for the table. The longer I spent in the basement, the greater the feeling of dread grew in me. We found the extra table and headed back upstairs, joking about how creepy a seemingly normal basement was. While we were all celebrating, my girlfriend decided she wanted to run the washer, which was downstairs. She was going to go down alone when she came back and asked me to go with her, since it was creepy. Again, I went down and rushed to leave. The basement was now officially scary to me. The party continued and we had a wonderful time. As the night started to settle, people got in their Ubers back to their hotels, and now it was just me and my girlfriend, unwinding after an afternoon of eating and drinking. We were relaxing when the laundry buzzer went off. I looked at her and she said she didn't pick up the load from earlier. I thought it was strange that it hadn't beeped hours ago. We headed down to the basement. Again, she stopped at the stairs to the basement and asked me to go first. As I was going down, the buzzer on the washer went off again, scaring us. We both jumped. I hurried down, grabbed the laundry, and we headed upstairs to let it air dry. As we finished, I could tell she was still nervous. We decided to go through the house and lock all the windows and doors. This is pretty standard when we visit an Airbnb. We never miss this step. My girlfriend stays beside me this whole time. We finally have one last door, the door to the backyard, right outside the kitchen and at the top of the basement. I go and lock the door, ignoring the sense of dread I felt with my back turned to the basement. I should mention this was an old house, so the stairs were steep and the bedroom where we slept was probably originally an attic. In order to turn on the lights upstairs, you had to flip a switch at the bottom of the stairs. As we made our way in the dimly lit house to the light switch, I think our sense of tiredness overcame the dread we had. I flipped on the switch and headed for the stairs. As I did, I heard a loud banging sound, like the sound of pots or something metallic clanging. It was a fast tone. My girlfriend's face was full of fear, and I'm sure mine was too. I began to go for the kitchen where there was a knife, but then I heard the whacking again. At the top of the stairs, I turned to look against the now illuminated attic and saw a ceiling fan turned on to its max setting and its mounting pole making that sound. I ran upstairs and turned off the fan. My girlfriend was close behind me. We got ready for bed. I headed downstairs to turn off the light switch and went upstairs. I looked outside the window of the attic to check on my car out front. Everything was good. We began to fall asleep. It was a restless night, hot and stuffy. I had dreams of seeing a shadowy figure out on the lawn. I woke up the next morning tired. I made my way down to the kitchen to brew some coffee. As I was turning around, I looked at the staircase to the basement. Something was wrong. I don't know why, but I was drawn to the basement again. I looked down the stairs and walked down. I looked around and saw nothing. I headed upstairs, then we had breakfast, packed our bags, and got ready to go. As we were doing one last sweep, I checked the kitchen one more time to make sure everything was in good shape. Just as I was about to say, "All good, let's go," that damn laundry machine buzzed. Both me and my girlfriend were just like, "Nope," and proceeded to get the hell out. As we were leaving in a rush, I grabbed the bags and told my girlfriend to start the car. As this was going on, the fan upstairs turned on again and began making that whacking noise. I've never bolted so fast out of a house. When I got to the car, my girlfriend saw the look of panic on my face. "What happened?" The fan turned on again. I got her out of the driver's seat and we sped off to collect our thoughts at a local diner. I texted the Airbnb host that the washer kept on making noises and that I couldn't figure out how to turn off the ceiling fan upstairs. They messaged back, "Thank you for staying with us." I stayed at an Airbnb in Paris. The place was a 4-story apartment that I rented just for a weekend with a few friends. The larger apartment building was maze-like with no windows in the common spaces and had those elevators that look like they are lined with concrete, which was a bit off-putting to start. Despite being 4 stories, the apartment was extremely small and narrow throughout. I stayed on the top floor, which was a converted attic with 2 beds and some basic accommodations. It never felt right being up there. It was dark, had no windows, and was just a bit claustrophobic. But I didn't think I'd mind because we weren't going to be spending a lot of time there. Well, the first night I ended up sleeping at a French girl's place, which was its own half regret of a story. But the second and final night I went back to the apartment late with only one other friend from my small group, and he took the only bed on the only small room off the bottom floor. That bottom floor room had a thick door with a hotel lock and was the only way in or out of the apartment that we knew of. I couldn't get comfortable and couldn't fall asleep in that attic. It just didn't feel right. Making things worse, we didn't want to use the hotel lock on the front door because we had some friends that may or may not come back in the middle of the night. We did lock the deadbolt though. I was tossing and turning all night, spending lots of time staring at the ceiling. I stayed completely still and silent. Around 4 a.m., I heard footsteps walking up the final staircase and the only exit, which led directly to the door of the attic room. The door whispered open, making a disturbingly quiet, high-pitched squeal. I don't think I would have heard it if I hadn't already been awake. It was dark, really dark, and I could barely make out the door slowly peeling open, as if someone was trying to sneak in. I stayed laying on my side and kept my eyes locked on the doorway as it continued to open, until I called out thinking it was my friend, perhaps trying to mess with me. No response, but the door stopped inching open for a second. I called out again and again. I got no response. But now the door swung wide open, slamming against the wall, and I saw a shadow outline of a person, distorted by darkness and barely illuminated only from the doorway behind, which had a window looking out onto the streets of Paris on the wall across from the top steps. The figure started approaching me slowly. It was so dark in there that I couldn't make out exactly what or who was coming silently towards me. But I didn't wait to find out. I went full fight or flight mode and sprang up and out of bed, grabbing a nearby heavy lamp to use as a blunt weapon. My eyes must have been better adjusted to the dark than my evening guest, and I was able to keep my distance. I occasionally swung the lamp while moving in a skewed clockwise circle around the figure in the narrow claustrophobic attic as it approached me. After what felt like a few minutes, but was probably a few seconds, I found myself with a clear path to the doorway and the subsequent staircase, so I threw the lamp at the intruder, breaking it with a shatter, and I flew down all 3 flights of stairs with so much energy, I was lucky not to fall and hurt myself. I shook awake my one friend who made it back with me that night and said that crazy shit was going down upstairs. I looked back and the door to the apartment was wide open. I told him that I was leaving right now and calling the cops and that he should join me. He did join me without a second thought. Both of us were in pajamas and neither of us even grabbed our phones. We were trying to get out of there so quickly. As we were fleeing the building, we ran into two of our other friends who got the Airbnb with us as they were exiting the strange concrete elevators. Being so drunk that their words were mostly slurred into an incoherent ramble, they basically said that we were just freaking out and that we should go back to the apartment with them. They also didn't want to call the cops because they were insisting on finishing all the drugs they bought because nobody wanted to take them on the plane to our next destination. My soberish friend and I said we weren't going back and left the building. A few minutes later, my drunk friends texted us that the place was all clear, but we were assholes for leaving the door open and trashing the place. We did leave the door open, but we did not trash the place. I did break a lamp, though. I spent the rest of the night at a 24/7 McDonald's alone when my friend, who was downstairs, decided that he wanted to go back to get some rest before the flight. I didn't go back to the Airbnb the next morning until after sunrise. I got my stuff as quickly as I could and got the hell out of there. To this day, nobody believes me, but I am 100% confident that somebody broke into our Airbnb that night. I never ended up calling the police, but I told the Airbnb owner the story and he thought I was just trying to get out of paying the damages on the lamp. I gave the place a 1-star review with simply the comment, decent location, decent amenities, but I'm pretty sure someone broke in during the middle of the night and tried to kill me in the attic. None of my friends nor the owner believed me. I got charged extra for breaking a lamp in self-defense. This is not a joke. I won't be going back. Me and my friends rented an Airbnb in San Jose for one of their birthdays. It was one of those properties that had 3 little guest houses and one main house where the owner stayed. 3 out of the 5 of us went to the Airbnb first to get ready for dinner, and immediately upon entering, I felt a really weird vibe. Almost like being watched. Just a kind of on edge feeling. I brush it off and we go to dinner for the next few hours. We come back and going into one of the 2 bedrooms to change, I realize that there is no doors for the closet and a little tiny door on the closet floor that is covered by carpet. I make a small comment about that being kind of creepy and brush it off, and all 5 of us go into the living room. Not even 20 minutes later, all of the lights shut off at the same time, except for the kitchen and TV. We hear something moving, so we look to the front door and notice that there is a rosary hanging on it, swinging back and forth. None of us were near it, so this really freaked us out, and we all started to slightly panic and tried getting a hold of the owner to see what they could do. They did not answer the phone despite us calling multiple times, and we could see their house from our window, and all of the lights and TV were on. We made the decision to nope the hell out of there. Luckily, all of our stuff was in the living room still, but when I realized I left my pants in the bedroom, I went to go open the door and got a really, really bad feeling about it. Like I went for the doorknob and had an overwhelming sense of dread that I should not open it. I decided to just leave them, and we quickly got into the car and left. The weirdest part is that the next day, my friend complained and got a full refund. We found that the Airbnb listing had been removed and the account deleted, only to be posted again under a complete different account, name, and number. I'm not sure if it was paranormal or a different kind of weird situation, but it definitely was a creepy one for us. We stayed in an Airbnb that was very likely haunted. So many weird things happened. The TV would turn off by itself at random times. The toothpaste vanished from the bathroom. and then reappeared a couple of days later. My daughter, who was around too, told me that someone kept pushing her. One day, all of us were at the beach except my wife. She was in the bathroom and suddenly the light turned off. Since the switch was outside the door on the wall, she thought one of us came home and turned it off. When she opened the door, there wasn't anyone there. There was a garage with an interior door into the house. Twice, I found random things lying on the doormat in front of the door. I know those things weren't there before because I would have stepped on them. We had friends come over, and one woman who has a history of psychic incidents refused to stay the night and checked into a hotel room. She wouldn't say why. She said she just didn't feel comfortable there. The weirdest thing happened the last night we were there. I woke up at midnight for some reason and realized that my wife was sitting up in bed, staring out the window. Before I could ask her what was wrong, every single light on the outside of the house turned on. There were 4 or 5 motion detector spotlights outside on the wraparound deck that covered the entire backyard, and they had all come on at once. I went outside to see if someone was out there, but didn't find anything. We finally got back to sleep, and around 5 minutes later, it happened again. This cycle continued all night long until morning. We didn't get a lot of sleep that night. The next morning, before we left, I was reading the guest book and realized that there were lots of comments by previous renters that implied that strange stuff had happened to them too. Words like interesting experience or unusual stay. I stayed in an Airbnb once, but it was a basement room. I had to be in by 10:30 p.m., and as the tenants were a little off, I went down early and said goodnight to the couple. As I reached the bottom step, I heard a click of a key in a lock. I went back up the stairs and checked the door, and yep, it was locked tight. I knocked quietly and softly and called out, but no one replied, although I could hear movement and what sounded briefly like laughing. I then phoned the Airbnb in the hope of someone answering, and someone did. An answering machine. I felt stupid and hung up. My prison for the night was very basic and small, with a sink, a cot, and a portable heater from a place that time forgot. And lots of frames on the walls, but oddly, no pictures. I went to bed, but not before I put a small obstacle course between my single corner bed and the steps. In the morning when I awoke, the door was slightly ajar. I dressed and went up for breakfast, a little annoyed and creeped out. I felt like trust had been violated and maybe rights had been infringed. The food was already ready, so I ate it, and as no one was around, went to pay. The landlady was very nonchalant and still a bit odd, and when I mentioned the door locking, without looking up, she said it was house rules and no one had complained before. She claimed it was, quote, for safety, as I might be a serial killer or worse, end quote. What's worse? I tactfully asked what would happen if a fire broke out, and she said there were people for that, presuming she meant firemen who'd rescue me. On a full tummy and on my way out, I realized I'd have to take up this issue online via a review, and I left. At the time, I didn't freak out, but thinking about it all much later, I really worried about being locked in a basement without any way out. Just a sealed door with a key controlled by a couple of oddballs. Maybe they were harmless, but if that door hadn't opened in the morning, or the ancient heater had caught fire, etc., who knows?